And excellent. Thank you. So we do that in a number of ways. First, by offering support groups to people who live with a mental health condition, and then those who support someone with a mental health condition. We also have a number of educational opportunities, such as classes and presentations. And then also our advocacy arm is that we work with our lawmakers, our court systems, and our police officers to make sure that people with mental health issues do get treated fairly. The nice part about NAMI Johnson County is that we were primarily volunteer led, and most people here have lived experience of a mental illness or caring for someone with a mental health condition. And we are connected to many, many local resources in the community. And so we encourage you to reach out to us. Now, I want to pass this off to Tara Gwynn, who's going to talk about the unique NAMI supports that we have for those people who are in our military.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. So my name is Tara Gwynn, and I run the NAMI Homefront program for Kansas. And what Homefront is an education program for anyone who cares about someone who is an active duty service member or veteran who has served that lives with any sort of mental health concern. The classes that we teach are a 6-week free education program. It's about 2 to 2.5 hours a week. And we go from everything from what is mental illness to different types of mental illness to therapies, medications, types of providers, things of that nature. And we do it all specific to the military and veteran community. We have several leaders throughout the state of Kansas. We do all of our classes virtually. We probably will not hold another one until 2025 because our materials are in the process of getting updated, because we like to make sure that we bring our classes the most updated information possible. So that will be happening, but I have no problem talking to anybody about anything military related. My background is my husband was in the military for over 20 years and was medically retired due to complications for complex PTSD, TBIs, depression, anxiety, and ADD. We also have what we call the SMVF Council. For those of you that are not familiar with that acronym, that stands for Service Members, Veterans, and Their Families. It's a mouthful to say, so we just say SMVF. So we have a SMVF Council that meets once a month that works specifically with the veteran and active duty communities to advocate for them, both on local and state and national policies, to make sure that this community of SMVF get the resources that they need, specifically regarding mental health and the stigma that is attached to it. They do have a support group that usually meets on the second Wednesday of every month. However, at this time, due to low attendance, whether it's because it's been summer or whatever, you can reach out to myself or specifically David Larson, and I'll put his email in the chat box, and to make sure that the group is meeting for that month. And then the last thing that's on the slide is the NAMI Homefront website. It has a ton of resources available for our SMVF community. There's also one that's not listed on the slide, that is our Veterans and Active Duty page, that has a different set of resources specifically for those that identify as veterans and active duty service members. So I could talk all day, every day about military and veteran stuff, but if you guys have any questions, I'll put my email in the chat box and you can feel free to reach out to me after this webinar, and I'll turn it back over to Kelly.
Thank you, Tara. Appreciate that. We also have a local event coming up next week. It is with Johnson County Mental Health, and this is called Valor and Voices. It's on Wednesday, November 13th from 6 to 8, and it is at the War Horses for Veterans in Stillwell, and it's an evening focused on supporting veterans and their mental health. This event will feature a screening of Ben's Story, which is a Warrior Films Veterans Journey home series, followed by a panel discussion with local veterans and mental health experts. The discussion will explore critical topics such as preventing suicide, reducing stigma, and increasing access to mental health care for veterans. We hope you will go and enjoy that presentation there. I will put the link for registration and all the details in the chat in just a minute. So last but not least, in regards to our opening announcements, I just want to remind you that our website, namijoko.org, is a great place to find all of the events and the activities that we offer. The easiest way to find out about support groups and classes, just go to the calendar page. It'll have it all laid out for you. You're welcome to email namijoko@gmail.com. And then, of course, feel free to call the resource line. This is not a crisis line. It's just a line to get you connected with local resources here in Johnson County, Kansas. And don't forget to visit us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at our handle at NamiJokoKS. This webinar is recorded and will be posted by tomorrow. So if you do want to share it with other veterans and service members and family members in your sphere of influence, please feel free to. All right, without further ado, I want to introduce Vicki Meek.
Hello, thank you all for being here. And this is our test run of having a lunch and learn. Jamie Waymeyer is our guest speaker, but Jamie agreed that probably when we normally would have had our first Tuesdays was tomorrow night, and there's just minor things going on in the world and tomorrow night, so we thought we'd try a lunch and learn. So I really appreciate those who have joined us today for this lunch and learn and for Jamie being flexible. Let me tell you just a little bit about Jamie. Jamie is a clinical director in the Battle Within, a nonprofit dedicated to helping veterans, first responders, and frontline medical staff begin healing from the traumatic injuries they've experienced. Jamie is the owner of Jamie Waymeyer LLC, where she conducts seminars, trainings, and consultations on trauma, traumatic loss, trauma-informed practices, and resilience. Throughout her career, she has studied trauma's impact on health and wellness. Trauma-informed practices provide a clear lens for her work in helping individuals heal from trauma. Jamie received her master's in social work from the University of Kansas and is a licensed clinical social worker. Jamie, I do appreciate you being here today, and I know Jamie it welcomes any questions or comments you may have. And Jamie, are you okay if we just put some of those in the chat, or
Absolutely.
what works best for you?
Yeah, that's fine. If you have questions, if you want to put them in the chat, and then Vicki and Kelly, if you guys want to if you keep an eye on that and let me know if you have a question, I'm happy to answer those as we go along. So
okay, great. Well, welcome, and thanks for spending your lunch hour with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here this afternoon to chat with you guys a little bit about something that I'm definitely must be fairly important to me, since I work for them and I love what I do. So I'm grateful for that. So just real quickly before I pull up my presentation, I am, as Vicki said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I've been with the Battle Within for 2 years. Actually, November 1st was my 2-year anniversary with them. I am not a veteran or first responder, but I come from a family of veterans and first responders. And so I have seen up close and personal the impact of their service to others and how it has impacted their mental wellness, and being able to serve veterans and first responders is definitely something that I'm passionate about and grateful that I'm able to have that opportunity to do so. I also experienced my own significant trauma a couple of years ago, or 7 years ago, actually 7.5 years ago. And prior to that, I was already doing this work around trauma. And then when I experienced my own trauma, it certainly led me to know intimately about the impact on the brain and body, and how significant that can be. And so for me, having the opportunity to share with you guys is just a part of my mission to bring this message around trauma and how to take good care of folks to other people. So with that, I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint, and I will share from that. Like I said, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Don't be shy about interrupting me and asking questions as we go along. And I definitely will have time at the end, I think, for us to, if I can answer any questions. So as I talk with you guys for the next little bit of time, I am going to be talking about veterans and first responders both. I'm going to give you a little bit of statistics around that, and a little bit of, because that is who we serve. And also because while their stories are different, oftentimes the consequences of their service to others is very similar. And so this is an opportunity for me to give you guys a little bit of information about that. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the ways that we believe in helping folks heal from their traumas, and then answer any questions that you guys might have, which is what I just said on this slide. That's what I'm going to do. So just a little bit of the statistics. So I will say this about these statistics, that they are statistics that are, of course, changing and evolving, and depending on where your source is, these are low or they're high. So this, I think, gives a good idea, though, around some of the statistics that we know about the risk of suicide for our veterans and first responders. When I look at that number, 30K active duty military completed suicide, that's a crazy number. That's incredibly high. And so we want to really be mindful of thinking about that. And that's the reason why programs like the Battle Within exist, to hopefully help our servicemen and women to come home, and to come home safely, and to continue to live after they return home. The other thing is that we know that that the suicide rates, while in some areas have been on the decline, in the first quarter of 2023, that they were on the rise again. And so we also know that 61% of the participants reported a mental health injury as a result of their service. 61%, that's a huge number to when we're considering statistics and why it's so important to get folks the help that they need. So again, this is a little bit of old data, but the VA reports 20 to 24 veterans take their lives per day. But there's a variety of reports that would show that to be different, because we also know that sometimes things are termed accidental suicides when or accidental deaths, when in fact they are likely not accidents. And this goes for veterans, first responders. The statistics are definitely don't include things like sometimes they'll attribute something, for example, to reckless driving, but there was intent to hurt themselves when they were, you just don't know that, obviously, if they don't survive to have that understanding. The other thing that we know is that oftentimes veterans, first responders who are at higher risk for suicide also put themselves in dangerous situations at higher rates, and those dangerous situations could result in death. We know that those that served for less than 3 years were at higher risk for suicide, and those that lived with a partner were less likely to complete suicide. And just again, this is just interesting data when you think about what we know about folks who are struggling, but that those who served were more likely to die by suicide or natural causes before the age of 64, as opposed to those who have never served. And that data is data that kind of you see that play out, and you guys may be well aware of this statistic, regardless of whether it's a veteran or a first responder, somebody who has experienced trauma or who has a mental health diagnosis are more likely to die at a younger age than the average citizen who doesn't have a diagnosis such as that. So a little bit of first responder statistics, and a disclaimer to first responder statistics. They are just now really starting to track this information. And so even when I do research on it, it is evolving pretty regularly. But it's estimated that 30% of first responders develop behavioral health conditions, as compared with 20% of the general population. In law enforcement, the estimates suggest that between 125 and 300 police officers complete suicide every year. And in a study about suicidality, firefighters were reported to have higher attempts and ideation than the general population. So again, it's just this reminder that the folks who are in service to us are at higher risk for suicidal thinking than the average population.
Jamie, this is Vicky. Can I
Hey.
jump in with a question that
Yeah,
somebody had?
please.
Are you okay
Yep.
with that?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it was Doris wanted to know, do you know why those who've served less than 3 years were at a higher risk? Do you have
So
any data on that?
That's a great question, Doris. So I'll tell you that I have a theory about that. And whether or not it's a true theory, I don't know. When they report that, a part of it is connection to who they serve with. The longer they serve, the more relationship they build with other people who have served. And we know that connection is a big, is a protective factor for folks. And so if we have those relationships and supports in place, we're more likely to use our brothers and sisters who have served with us when we're struggling. And so I think that that's a part of it. The other part of it is we talk a lot about service members who were not like actively deployed being more at risk at times, because there's some unresolved issues of I didn't really serve my country. I didn't go into service. And so I suspect that some of those who have served for lesser periods of time also were less likely to be in those situations where they're deployed and serving, even though 100% they were serving. That's one of the issues that we oftentimes have to address in our program is helping folks to move past this this weird kind of guilt that they have around what they did while they were in the service.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great question. So just a little bit of frontline medical statistics, because we do also serve frontline medical staff. So just this, as we're in the middle of COVID, as you know, our medical personnel, we learned we're experiencing some traumas that were really resulting in some similar things that we've seen with our veterans and first responders. And so we started serving them as well in our programs. And again, these are not statistics that have been tracked very long, and really as a result of what we've seen with our medical personnel because of COVID, they're really starting to track this a little closer. But female nurses are 1.4% more likely to complete suicide than the general population. Male nurses are 1.2 more likely. And then in a 2019 study, it showed that that physicians were at a significantly higher risk for suicide than the general population, and particularly female population. I'll just say from our work, and I'm seeing the folks who come through our program, the last few years have been very challenging for our medical personnel, and they are really struggling right now. And so, so certainly I suspect these statistics will continue to climb over the next several years. So what's missing? Well, as you guys know, because you're a part of NAMI, you know that despite all the things that we are trying to do to get past the stigma, it still exists. And it definitely still exists in the veteran and first responder population. You know, there's still a lot of fear about saying that I'm struggling. For active military, there's fear of losing their job. There's fear of, you know, if I say that I'm struggling, I'm not going to be able to serve anymore. Same for first responders. That stigma just still exists with being able to talk about mental health and the struggles that come with that. I already kind of mentioned about the healthcare profession and just not having the adequate data that we need. There's a lack of education on access. So we know that veterans and first responders are more likely to die by firearm. And healthcare workers are more likely to die by poisoning, again, because that's what they have access to. We don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about when, for example, if somebody, a veteran says to me, you know, Jamie, I'm really having thoughts about wanting to hurt myself. My first question is, do you have a gun? there is some discomfort in asking that question. And it's not because I'm trying to take their weapon from them, it's because I'm trying to keep them alive. And that's some of the comfort level that I think that that family and friends and loved ones need to get to whenever they have a veteran or first responder who is struggling. We need to be able to ask the questions directly, because access is the easiest. I mean, if I have access and I am really hurting, suicide, it can be an impulsive action. And if I have that easy access, it can happen before somebody's able to prevent it. Lack of understanding, and this is, I kind of already touched on this, of who's at higher risk. We know, of course, that folks who have killed somebody are at higher risk, or someone who they couldn't save. So this goes for veterans and first responders. For example, I have a comrade who died in service next to me while we were in combat. There's a lot that comes with that, that the veteran will carry with them after they leave the service. And then again, those who did not serve in combat. And then I touched a little bit on this as well, that deaths are oftentimes categorized as accidental when in fact they were not accidental, but there's just no way to prove otherwise in certain situations. So for me, it's just a curiosity as to whether or not those rates would be higher than what they are now. So I'm going to talk a little bit about secondary traumatic stress. This is what we would call what happens as a result of the jobs that put us in situations where we either witness things or we do things that that cause a trauma response for us, that changes the way our brain and body function. So I will say, as I give this kind of definition and this idea around trauma exposure response, secondary trauma, you can call it lots of different things. I will say that many of the folks who come into our program, and in fact, I mean, I'm not going to say 100%, but I will say really easily that 90% of the folks who come into our program oftentimes are experiencing trauma from prior to their time in service as well. And so oftentimes they will have childhood trauma, or they will come from domestic violence situations. They will have experienced a traumatic loss. And then add on top of that their service, where they have witnessed things, where they have had to do things, where they've heard stories, whatever it is that then is compounded with whatever that trauma that they may have experienced prior to going into the service, or becoming a first responder or frontline medical staff. I'll also say this, is that oftentimes our veterans and first responders are going into that into service at a young age, while their brain is still developing. And so that certainly impacts how their exposure to trauma kind of lives in their body, if you will. So when I think about this this definition, it comes from Laura Vander Lipsky, she's a social worker who writes a lot about how folks who have jobs where they're in service to others, over time something happens to us and we change. And so she gives this example that that really resonated with me, and doing this work resonates with the people that we serve as well. So some of you may either relate to this, or you may be like, oh, this is the person that I'm living with, or you may be like, oh, that's my child. I see this happening. I think about it as that over time, where we become kind of hypervigilant, a little bit jaded to what's happening in the world, and where we always think the worst possible thing is going to happen no matter what our situation is in. So she gives an example of being on vacation with her family. And they're on this beautiful bluff where they're looking at this beautiful scenery in front. You know, they can see the ocean crashing against the waves. And she said, she turned to her family and she said, well, this is really beautiful. I wonder how many people have died here from suicide. And here's her family looking at her like, what? And she said, and then the process just went through her brain of, well, I wonder where the nearest Trauma One center is. I wonder how they get help if somebody attempts and they survive. Like she said, it was just all these different things. And for her, that was kind of like, oh, something's not right with my thinking. I probably need to get some help for myself. But oftentimes we see this with veterans and first responders who they can't find joy anymore because they are living in such a state of hypervigilance, of worry, of fear of the next bad thing happening, if you will, that it's hard for them to find that spot where there's happiness again. Thought I maybe saw a question. Yes, Katrina, agreed that they joined the military to escape and didn't take themselves mentally and emotionally. So yeah, they join, but they don't get the help they need oftentimes before, so that they can have a career in the service or as first responders. So I just put down a list of kind of what it could look like if somebody is experiencing, you can call it PTSD if you want. We don't serve people who they don't have to have a diagnosis to come through our program. So many of the folks who come through our program will tell us that they've experienced some, many, or all of these symptoms. And they've never had a diagnosis of PTSD or complex PTSD, depression, anxiety. It's just that they know that something's not right, and they will seek help from us this way. And also, this list is not all inclusive. Every veteran or first responder who's experiencing a trauma response, they will tell you, they will have their own list, if you will, that will include some of these, but will probably include other things as well. Before I go on, do you guys have any questions about this list? Anything that you want me to explain before I move forward? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of our program and the way we think about healing for our veterans and first responders. I will say before I jump into that, just a little bit about our program. We have two programs. We have a 5-day program that's called the Revenant Journey, where folks come on site and stay with us for 5 days. And we do a lot of different skill building during that time. And I'm going to go through and talk to you about that. And then our other program is we connect folks with therapists who know how to work with veterans and first responders. But the program itself, the 5-day program, it was created by Adam Majors, who is our clinical manager. He is a veteran himself, and he's also a licensed professional counselor, who, when he came home from war, was struggling and really felt like nobody knew how to help him. And so he'll tell you he became a therapist by accident. And I will tell you, I don't think it's any accident that he does what he does for other folks. He created the program really around the idea that, when we are struggling, when we experience trauma, there's a transformation that happens in that way where we as I kind of described in the previous couple of slides, where something happens that I'm not the same person that I was before as a result of the things that I've experienced. And so when we come home from war, or when we come home at the end of every day because of the job we do, or when we've experienced, seen, witnessed things, our work is to transform back into a person who is, for lack of a better word, among the living again, because oftentimes we've experienced such traumatic things that we are not present in our bodies. We are not present with who we are. And so this idea that transformation is required to help somebody is a way that we really need to think about the healing process. So this is just this reminder about what this might look like. So we know that suicide is really about this desire for an instant transformation. So when I am experiencing suicidal thinking and I act on that, it is because I am suffering. I am suffering to the point that I don't know what else to do. And so I will do anything to get past that point of suffering. And so that's why when people talk about suicide and they'll say it is, you may have some ruminations about it, you may be thinking about it, but when that actual act happens, it is because the suffering is too much and I'm going to act on that. I can't think about all the other things around me that other people, the other consequences of that action. I'm just trying to get out of suffering. And so so what we really want folks to think about is when that suffering is not normal and people don't have to be in that much pain. And we want to teach them the skills so that they can be present, that they can find joy again, that they can have these different have happiness and have connection again with people. So a couple of things that we would do to do, I'm going to kind of go through each of these a little bit, and these are things that as family members, it's important for you to understand as well, or as loved ones supporting, whether it be a friend or a family, whoever it is that you support. There's kind of some steps that to me, it's just as important for family to understand, because also, by the way, I know that family members experience trauma as a result of living with somebody who's struggling with the trauma from their service to others. And so so some of the things that we really want folks to understand is what's happened to them, what's happened to their brain and body, understanding their responses, developing connection, and then using ceremony. So I'm going to kind of buzz through each of these a little bit and give you some examples. And then I'll probably be able to pause for some questions. So the first thing that is really important is just in general that we are creating space for veterans and first responders to tell their stories. And I know that sometimes this is a very, very challenging piece because their stories are oftentimes things that we cannot even imagine. And so they don't talk. And when they don't talk, it stores in their body. It becomes something that is bigger than them at times. And so if there's nothing else that I can encourage folks to do is this idea around how do we create space for veterans and first responders to tell their stories? How do we let them know that it's okay? I'm not going to judge you for what happened. I'm going to what we call hold space for you as you share your story. And so holding space means I don't have to have an answer for the things that happened to you. I just need to be able to be authentically in the space with you as you tell your story. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes we don't want to hear those stories because they're also traumatic to us, and that's okay. We also have to protect ourselves. But veterans and first responders need a place where they can tell their stories, where they can be authentic, where they can work through the things that they've happened. And in fact, I don't think oftentimes we as just as loved ones, as friends, as family, we don't have the skills necessary to help them really process their stories. And so so when I say creating that space, sometimes it's also helping them get connected to somebody who can truly help them move through their stories and process it as they go as well. The other thing that we teach a lot about is emotional regulation. We really talk a lot about the brain and what happens to our brain when we experience trauma. And so so it's my belief that most of us probably need to understand what's happening to our brain when we experience adversity, because I know for a fact that any of us who lived through COVID have experienced some form of trauma as a result of that. Something has shifted because of just that experience in our communities. And so so when I think about the brain and how we kind of find a spot of healthiness, I really think it's important for family members to understand that that when a veteran or a first responder is triggered or is in a trauma response, what's oftentimes happening is that they are in their impulsive part of their brain, their amygdala, or their lizard brain, as some people would call it. They're in the part of their brain that is is responding to fight, flight, or freeze like this. And they are often not able to think when they are in that impulsive part of their brain, when they're in the amygdala. And so our goal is to help people move forward in their brain to the thinking part of their brain, to their prefrontal cortex. And so for me, when I really understood what that shift was, it's like I stopped trying to teach my younger son to quote calm down when he was in crisis, because that if I would have said that to him when he was in crisis and he was in this impulsive part of the brain, he wouldn't been able to just quote calm down. Like we had to have tools available that would help him to get into his thinking part of the brain. And so just a real simple example of that is we teach about having sensory items around. So for example, if your loved one has a favorite song that you know calms them when they're feeling dysregulated, having them turn that music on or turning that music on for them is a way that they can get out of that that kind of crisis brain and into their more thinking part of their brain. Having things like if y'all could see my desk, it's a hot mess full of all different types of sensory items that I grab onto whenever I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed. So I have like a fidget spinner, I have a shell, I have a smooth stone. Having those things available are simple ways that we can help folks to regulate. There's lots of other ones, but those are the ones I think for today would be the easiest to kind of have in your back pocket. The other thing that is really important is that we do whatever we can to protect our brain. So we're going to teach skills about this, but also just as humans, we need to be doing everything we can to protect against adversity, because we're all going to experience adversity, right? And so there are things that we can be doing ahead of time to create the safest space for our brains to be able to deal with things. So having understanding about things like mindfulness and meditation, movement, brain breaks. So mindfulness and meditation, I always tell folks that I used to teach about this, and I thought it was like, hippy dippy stuff, and I was not going to practice it, but I was going to sure tell you that you should be practicing it until I realized I needed it. And it wasn't even, it was probably actually in the middle of COVID that I realized I need to probably start doing some of the things I'm preaching to other people about if I want to be well. And so, so mindfulness, ooh, I see that I have mindfulness spelled wrong too. Sorry about that. So when we think about it, what I really tell folks and what I would tell you as well, as loved ones, oops, sorry, I was trying to admit that person, as loved ones, is that you guys need to practice this stuff too as well, because you need to regulate your brain whenever you're struggling or whenever your person is struggling, because your brain is going to respond as well. So some really simple things that I've learned are like breathing is pretty important. We all do it. And there's some really easy ways that we can do breathing exercises. We can do there's apps that will walk you through breathing exercises. You can do a simple breathing exercise where you just take a deep breath in, and when you exhale for 2 counts longer than you inhale. Journaling about your gratitude, that's a way that we can be mindful. I tell folks, people say, well, Jamie, I'm always grateful. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't count. You have to actually write it down. Really taking time each day to write down like 3 things you're grateful for, and then what your goals are for the day. I promise you, if you do that for 2 weeks, you will be amazed at the shift that happens at the end of 2 weeks. How you wake up, you'll feel a little different if you've been practicing some simple things like that. Movement in nature. You know, if you have a loved one who's really struggling, having them go out and take a walk, just reconnecting with outside is a really powerful way to help them kind of reset their brain. And then brain breaks, which are some of the examples I already gave around sensory things. And then the last thing that was really important for veterans and first responders is this, what I call the dirty word of vulnerability, which is certainly for veterans and first responders when they first come to see us, a dirty word. Because in truth, being vulnerable could have gotten them killed or can get them killed in the work that they do as a veteran and a first responder. And so so helping them understand. And so what happens is as a veteran has to have their defenses up to keep themselves safe, to keep their platoon safe, or to keep their people safe. The first responder has to have everything in place to keep themselves safe, to keep their partner safe, to keep the community safe. So this wall is up, but what happens is we don't transform and let that wall come down when we return to our loved ones, when we return to our family and friends. And so over time, that shift that I talked about at the beginning happens because I don't know how to be vulnerable again. I don't know how to let people authentically see how I'm feeling, how I'm really doing. And so one of the things that is really important as veterans work on healing is that they allow for vulnerability, allow for being able to say, I'm really scared, I'm really sad, I'm really struggling. And for people to non-judgmentally hold that space as they start to really connect with what they're really feeling. And then we also, just in general, I know for myself, whenever I'm stressed and overwhelmed, empathy is kind of one of the first things that hits the road for me. Unfortunately, and also it's like my notice to myself that I probably need to be doing some better things to take care of myself. And so I think that the more we can help veterans and first responders understand what empathy really looks like as we go down that path. You know, I always say it's kind of like when I'm at the kind of end of my rope and I'm not feeling connected to anyone, and then somebody asks me to do something and I look at them like they have two heads, that I don't feel kindness towards them. These are the times when I definitely need to figure out where and how to get my empathy back on course. And definitely for our veterans and first responders that can become you know, really jaded over time. And so we want them to have that connection to and care for others. And then of course this idea that I'm not alone, you know, in our program, we don't separate out veterans, first responders, frontline medical. In any given class, you're going to have a variety of folks, and it's the connection to I can feel pain and I can say it, and even though our stories aren't exactly the same, I can connect with another person who's had similar experiences. That's where the power of this connection can come through. And then last but not least is just an idea around ceremony, and y'all can do this on your own. We add a lot of ceremony into our 5-day program that we do, but I myself add ceremony into my life just when I am struggling. And these are things that you can do with your loved one together. Some simple ways to do that, you know, are things like letter writing and fire burning and different things like that are just again it is this idea around, if I plan something to, let's say, celebrate a success that I've had, just think about whenever somebody graduates or a wedding or anything like that. When we plan something around that, it helps us to feel better. And so this is the same idea if I'm dealing with, say, for example, the anniversary of something that happened whenever I was in service that caused me pain. But if I create some sort of ceremony around that, honoring that piece of my story, but I'm also being intentional about that healing process. And so that's a lot of where the healing comes in. And then just, of course, the ongoing support really that is this reminder that healing is a journey. And so for veterans and first responders, certainly we know that that it's a slow road to heal and to feel well and to find that space where frankly joy and pain can live in the same space. And we figure out the ways to get there. And so that is our goal, is to help folks understand that that they can walk that journey, and they can deal with and cope with their traumas, and also find a happiness again. So I'm going to stop there and see if you guys have any questions.
Jamie, this is Vicky. I really like that idea of creating a ceremony or planning. Hadn't thought about it in that particular way with those different events in our life that sometimes share the joy and pain also in our space. So that I like that idea. That's given me something to ponder. My word for the year is pondering. So I'm going to ponder that, because I'd not really had somebody frame that to me in that way, and it makes sense. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I tell you what, I have found there's all different ways that, you can do a big ceremony, you can do a small ceremony. There's no rules about how or when that takes place. But like, I know for myself, with my my oldest son was killed several years ago, and so on the anniversary of his death date, I have learned how to use ceremony as a way to help me through that day. It gives purpose to that day for me now, not just sitting and being sad all day, but also it helps me not just to honor him, but to honor my family, to honor, so there's all different ways that you can use ceremony around difficult days, anniversaries, things like that, that absolutely will help you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Katrina, are you talking? You might be muted.
I'm going to stop the share if that's okay, and that way we can maybe see folks a little better.
I had a question while
Oh, she's on a phone.
Karina's
Okay.
I did have a question. I don't know if this is a direct question or not, but what role does substance use disorder play in regards to the mental health of our first responders and soldiers?
Yeah, certainly. Unfortunately, it plays a pretty big role. We know that substance use is definitely very prevalent in both the veteran and first responder world. We know, even one of the things that we talk a lot about is when we talk about this connection, sometimes there's this false connection with folks around, like, I get off of a really heavy shift, or I have my weekend pass and I'm going to go drinking with my buddies. That is not actually connecting in a way that's a healthy way, right? Because I'm not really talking about how I'm feeling, how I'm really doing. I'm just numbing out the feelings. And so, and it is a common response, unfortunately, for both our veterans and first responders.
Thank you for that.
Hey, Jamie, this is Katrina. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yay. Okay, fantastic. I gave a lot of brilliance earlier. You missed it. I'm just kidding. Actually, what I said was, I actually have a husband who's a graduate of Battle Within.
Oh.
And I'm curious, do you have any ongoing support for graduates?
Yeah, so we have a couple of things that are ongoing. First of all, we do have our frontline therapy network. So if somebody doesn't have a therapist and they come through our program, we're all about the therapy, and so we do not believe we are one and done when they come through our 5-day program. So we do get that connection going, but then also there are a couple different things that we have for for graduates, we have a monthly virtual support group that we just started actually about, shoot, 2-3 months ago. Because we do serve veterans and first responders across the country. And so that's a way that our alumni can get together regardless. So we have that opportunity monthly. And then we also have just alumni events. So oftentimes I'll send out like, for example, the Royals will say, how many tickets do you need for a Royals game? And so I'll send out and have like 100 tickets, for Royals. So we'll have those events. And then like we have a Christmas party that'll be coming up in December for alumni. So the most formal thing, Katrina, is the monthly support group. And then also we have different opportunities that come up at various times throughout the year. So for example, we're working on a moral injury class for our alumni to be able to attend. And so that'll happen after the first of the year. They'll get an email that they can sign up and attend that class. And that'll be like a 3 to 4 week class that they would be able to participate in. So we do some more formal education, some kind of more fun activities, if you will, because we also think that that's just as important as
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm curious also, one other thing, do you have any information for family members? And I know I had asked this when he had first graduated, because I'm like, okay, he's going to come back into our home after being gone for 5 days. And how do I keep the behaviors, how do I help, not keep, but how do I help keep the behaviors consistent? Well, I personally think he could use a refresher class. But that being said, but there wasn't anything at the time for family members. So is there anything now?
Yeah, so this I will tell you this, Katrina, that is on my my list. Is I think the problem, I mean, obviously the problem is the funding. And so so I was just taking notes from Kelly and Vicky ahead of time when and Tara, when they were talking about the different supports that that NAMI offers for family members, because that is definitely something that I feel like is lacking for our veteran and first responder population is the supports for families. And also I 100% believe you are directly impacted by, I mean, you can't live with somebody who's had trauma and not also experience your own
Right.
around that.
Well,
So,
thank you for that, which is probably one of the reasons why I got involved with NAMI, because I personally was looking for my own resources.
absolutely.
For my own help. To being a caregiver and a loved one with mental health needs. And so anyways, thank you for that recommendation. Anyways, I love the program. I love what you all do. Thank you so much for everything you do. And thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you. Stay tuned, because if I have my dream way, I'm going to have like a couples, like a long weekend one, but I don't know when, but someday. That's my goal.
Well, if you need help, let me know. Reach out. I'll be happy to help.
I will for sure. For sure.
I'm gonna,
Amanda,
can I follow up real quick on the support group thing
Yeah.
with the NAMI stuff? So right now, I know the SMVF support group that meets once a month. The reason I have you guys reach out to David Larson is because we haven't had people attending the last few months. But I do know we have, it's not geared specifically towards the SMVF community, but there is a NAMI support group specifically for spouses and partners that meets on the 2nd and 4th Tuesday. It's run, there's 4 of us that run it. And I would say about half of the group are military or veteran spouses that attend that group. I will make sure Kelly has that information so that you guys can reach out to her and get the registration for that group. But again, it's only for spouses and partners of anyone that lives with a mental health condition, not just SMVF community. But I know that's where we're starting to pick up a lot of veteran and active duty spouses in that group. And I'm also talking to my husband and trying to twist his arm a little bit to doing a veteran specific group for PTSD. just because I see a need there that hasn't been met in a lot of other places. I get a lot of requests for that. I just got to convince him to do it with me. So, thank you, Kelly, for putting that link up in the chat box. So that's all I had to say about support groups.
Amanda, I saw your question about the support group. So the alumni support group is on Tuesday nights. They do have to be a graduate of the Revenant Journey, the 5-day program, but it's on Tuesday evenings.
Jamie, I really appreciate the fact that you also talked about the healthcare workers, because I know that's been especially, and you're right, during COVID, it was very stressful, but it's still, they experience a lot of, just a lot, I call it the yuck factor, a lot of yucky stuff that happens. So I appreciate the fact that you also serve that population, because there is a need.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, are we good? What do you guys think of Lunch and Learns? Everybody hung with us. I thank you very much.
Can I answer one more question in the chat box? SMVF stands for Service Member Veteran and Their Families. It's just a lot easier to say SMVF than it is to say Service Member Veteran and Their Families every single time. And as a veteran's wife and 18+ year Army wife, I'm used to saying acronyms all the time. So thank you for calling me out on that.
Okay, well, I thank everybody.
Thank you.
Kelly, anything that you need
No.
before we wrap up?
No, just the last point is that we will be putting this on our YouTube channel. So please make sure to look for that link. We can also email that out to all of us who have registered and participated today, so that we can send that out to any friends or family who may need to hear this great message. Thank you, Jamie. Your organization and your group is critically important to our community, and we are just really thankful to connect with you and to have this. I know Katrina had told us before of just what a major difference it made in her home. And that's a huge, huge benefit for us. So we appreciate your time. We appreciate your work. And thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, all.